All right, guys, sorry about that. There was a little technical difficulty there. I apologize. So this is one of our first webinars we're doing today, and we're live. Great. I just wanted to give you a couple of hints about this is a new platform from Google that they've offered us. And so there is an option, if you're watching through YouTube, there's a little link there that you can click into to ask us questions. And there's also a you have the ability to maximize the screen. If you're working while you're listening, we totally understand. You may have it minimized or whatever, but if you do want to see the text, there's a maximize option there. The Google platform is pretty good. In our test, it's worked really well, but I do want to mention that sometimes it cuts out for a second or two. If it does cut out, just please be patient and it should come back. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Today, the webinar will be on the planning stage of working with e-commerce. It is often a stage that is neglected. People often mean well that they want to do planning, but when push comes to shove, everyone is very busy and they often skip this step. The runtime for the webinar is about 37 minutes. My name is Calvin Luttrell. I'm the CEO of Project Thunder, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a minute. The topic is the planning stage. By the end of the presentation, our goal is that you'll know how much planning is really needed for your website and also to avoid costly mistakes. Also, I just wanted to mention that I just got my new American Express card, so I wanted to do a little contest. If you can hang around to the end of the webinar, I will basically buy something off of your website if you sell on your e-commerce website, limiting it to a $50 value, of course. But in addition to that, I will review your product and talk about it on Twitter. And we did this recently with a prospect that we're working with, and he was nice enough to actually go ahead and put our name on the first aid kit. This is a webinar, so there is a special offer at the end, but I will save that for the end of the webinar. And I'll just jump right into some content here. So I wanted to start with this quote that actually has to do with the building that we first saw in the beginning of the presentation. This building, if you don't recognize it, is Freedom Tower, which was built in the wake of what happened in 9/11. And so we were able to, they cleaned up that mess and they began building this, this skyscraper. And so there was a lot of groups involved, a lot of planning went into it. And so I wanted to draw some parallels between building a skyscraper and making an e-commerce website part of your business, not just a cost of doing business, but something that's a part of your business. And that means digging into the details, and it means doing a little bit of planning. Now, it doesn't mean that you should do all the work as it pertains to planning. The planning should be a collaboration between you and the firm that's building your website. And so it means you do have to make time for it, but it doesn't mean you should do all of the work on your own. It really should be a collaboration. So let me jump down to this quote. One of the architects of Freedom Tower commented on some of the gnashing of teeth, if you will, that went into the planning of the building. And he said, the discourse about Freedom Tower has often been limited to symbolic, formal, and aesthetic aspects, but we recognize that the building doesn't function well. If people don't want to work and visit there, then we will have failed as architects. And that's what I believe about, if we're going to build your website or your business system or your e-commerce website, that if we don't build it in a way that all the details line up and people shop there, then we haven't done our job very well, and you won't make money. And the reality is that you're probably not going to hire us, long term if we didn't do a good job. So some of the things about this particular skyscraper that make it different than other buildings, it's actually the most environmentally sustainable skyscraper in the world. It's the 4th tallest building in the world. It has biological and chemical ventilation systems. It's reinforced concrete pillars to withstand bombs, and it's made from recycled materials. This makes it a very special building. So it's not just a building, it also has other things about it that make it very special. And it also has, protection mechanisms built into it as well, which also makes it special. So when we have like politicians, they want to be seen speaking in front of it. Businesses are setting up shop there. Celebrities are there talking about it. It was such an interesting build that somebody actually did a time lapse of building this building from beginning to end, and it's a really interesting watch. And I'll just mention that at the end of the presentation, as we get closer to wrapping up, I'll give you guys my email address, and I'll be asking you to email me if you'd like a copy of this presentation. But that way you guys can look at all of this content and take a peek at it. I guess I'm sentimental, but you know, in the wake of what happened in 9/11, there was not a lot of people know, but there was about 7 tons of steel that was set aside from the original buildings, and that steel was melted down, and it's basically was used to build this destroyer, basically the ballast of the ship. So, which is probably also a very interesting planning exercise. All right. I don't necessarily like to talk about myself too much, but I just want to introduce myself a little bit. If you guys are on Twitter, feel free to follow me at Calvin Luttrell. I just try to give you a snapshot of my experience. I started my computer career at a software company called Goldmine. You may or may not have heard of it. They are still around in some fashion, but I worked there probably about 15 years ago. When I was first hired, I was 19 years old, and I was, of course, terrified of everything. But they took care of me. So over time, I started to support Platinum partners, working more with the premier customer set. And they were able to kind of put me wherever I was needed. So I was able to work with partners, not just to train them, but also to certify them in the platform, basically giving them, you know, mentoring them. And it was hard for me because, you know, being 19 years old and mentoring someone who's 55, 65 years old, who's been working with computers longer than you've been alive, is a bit intimidating. But the training that I was given and the opportunities and the confidence and the grooming really made a lot of people who work there very successful. So I do contribute whatever form of success I've had to my beginnings there. And after the dot-com craze, I bounced around a little bit like a lot of people in my industry, and then I landed at a marketing company called 1-800-DENTIST. If you've ever seen a television ad during the day, you may have seen a 1-800-DENTIST ad. While I worked there, I basically helped them move to newer technologies. We focused on conversions. They're a marketing company, so they have to basically sell referrals to the dentists. And so we worked with them to effectively enhance the conversion of the website. And it was kind of a contentious thing because marketing owned the website and we were in IT, and we sort of asserted ourselves that we could improve the conversions. And by doubling the conversion, it was a huge win for the company and for everyone. So we also worked into the call center applications. We developed turnkey applications for the call center. And I also helped recruit and the development members. And we also helped speed up the search, because searching for a dentist is actually pretty complicated when you're factoring in the needs of multiple parties. So we were able to optimize that by 3,200%. While working for Project Thunder over the last 10 years, we've had the honor of working with so many great customers, and just, you know, being on the phone a lot with so many of you, and especially the group of people on this call. I personally looked at all of your websites and your social media, and I can see that you guys have a very unique set of products. These are, a lot of the products were very unique and very interesting, and so and we've had that kind of experience with our other customers as well, not just in the B2C, but also in B2B. So in the way that we like to work with our clients is over time, and I'm going to be talking about this a little bit, but when you do an e-commerce website or any type of business, you never get it right on day one. So we've always worked with customers to lower their costs through continued improvement over time. And we usually work with customers, our average retention rate is 7 years. So folks usually sign up with us and they stay with us until the end, however the end comes. We've also worked on increasing e-commerce conversions through small iterative changes and making small changes there. We've also worked on merchandising strategies. If you have ever done merchandising in a retail store or online, you know that sometimes you have to put banners and things like that to help encourage sales. We've also helped customers with their PPC and SEO, and also helping customers if you are not familiar with retargeting. I beg you to go to Google and search for retargeting advertising, so you can get, if your website has a high enough amount of traffic, you could begin to benefit from that immediately, and that would be great for everyone. We've also helped customers from failed solutions and bad actors. Unfortunately, I'm in an industry where anyone with a notepad is a web developer, and that's okay for a lot of things, but a lot of times people misrepresent. And, for instance, I've got a phone call the other day, somebody on eCommerce, and they had worked with a couple of different companies already, and they had integrated and also implemented their own business on top of the eCommerce software. Unfortunately, $250,000 later, they still do not have a completed website. And so, as we were looking at, the problems that they had cataloged about 250 bugs. And, this eCommerce software is not a lot different than what you folks are using with BigCommerce or AmeriCommerce or those types of platforms. So, just get these stories, and after 10 years, I have a huge catalog of these sort of horror stories. So that's why we feel planning is important and why we do it with our customers. And having worked with these guys, we were able to save some customers from some bad situations. And when you help a customer in that situation, it also tends to lend to keeping them around for a while. We also act as the IT department for some software companies. There's a software company that has a SaaS-based app that generates about $45,000 a month in monthly sales. We also did we were the primary web producer in a website that we did for the city of Los Angeles recently. We've also built and designed award-winning shrink wrap software. You can think of that as like software you would install on your computer. So let's talk a little more about why is planning important. And everybody knows that planning is important. So I realize I don't need to sell you on that idea, but what I want to do is sell you on the idea that it can be done easily, and that it can be done as a collaboration, and it doesn't have to feel like homework. Also gives me opportunity to show you guys some cartoons, and everybody knows that a plan is a good thing to have. We talk about it. We all get it. So I want to give you an ambiguous example of good planning versus bad planning. And the reason why I want to do that is I want you to get an idea of what's going to be appropriate for you and your business. So this is a picture of the Winchester house. I don't know if you're familiar with Winchester. Was the gun that won the West. And so the family, of course, made a lot of money. I believe I read on Wikipedia, she was making about $3,000 a day. And that was back in 1902. So she was making good money. And of course, a lot of the, with guns, there were a lot of victims. And so she had some concerns there I'll get to in a second. But if you look at the house, it's very beautiful. The gardens are manicured. Everything looks really nice. I would probably want to live there just looking at it from the outside. But as you start to dig a little deeper, we start to see that there are doors where there shouldn't be doors. There are stairways that go to nowhere. I'm sure everyone's had a job like this, right, where you're going nowhere. And she built and built. She had teams of carpenters that built on this thing for years and years and years. Wikipedia, it says that at one point it was 7 stories tall, but then there was some sort of fire or some sort of earthquake or something that they had to rebuild it, and so now it's much smaller. But you can see it's a pretty big structure. So is that good planning or bad planning? Well, for her purposes, she felt like her home was haunted by spirits, and so for her and her needs, this was good planning. This helped her. It brought her relief from what she was dealing with. So there are going to be situations where I'll present a lot of information, and you guys should take what's useful for you and your situation and what you're dealing with, because not every situation is the same. So now I want to talk about an example that's a little more cut and dry, of maybe possibly a bad example of planning. And so, yep, we're going to go there. This is the healthcare.gov website. If you followed the news at all, you probably heard about the website having some problems. I followed it a little more closely. I actually watched the C-SPAN coverage of Congress's investigation into it and all the people that were responsible. From the Health and Human Secretary, the president spoke on it. There's all sorts of IT people that commented on what was going on. In fact, I think this girl here had to go into witness protection because people were so upset about this website. So what does all that mean? When things go bad, everybody likes to get in on it, right? So if you've ever done a website project at your company and things were not going well, everybody likes to get their lick in, right? I remember being in a conference room with a large bunch of people, and we was a multiple vendor project, and so we were just attending, and one woman got up and just started going crazy, and she went off about how the solution wasn't good and she wasn't happy, and she stormed out. And I know she got her yayas out, and everybody wants to get in, right? So here's like Donnie Wahlberg talking about how awful the website is, and I guess this is a fan correcting his math, but it's a good point, right? $600 million for a website that doesn't work. The president doesn't know what's going on. The lady who's in charge of the department doesn't know what's going on. She's saying blame those people. And ultimately, the parties that were involved in the technology stack, like Red Hat and Google and Oracle, they brought in their best people and the stuff got fixed. And that's, to be honest with you, these big websites, and Alex and I have built these sites before, this is sort of the way that it goes. Most websites don't start off with 30 million people on day one. They start off small. Even Google did not start off with everything on day one. They gradually, over time, acquired that business. So everybody's had 80% of people, according to the Chaos Report, have had a bad experience trying to, put on an e-commerce website, do an integration, do a marketing campaign or whatever. So a lot of times when customers get to me, they're kind of like this guy here in the suit with the gas mask and the umbrella. They just want to get what they need without getting ripped off, and we understand that because there are so many people out there offering these services. So let's jump into a quote here. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Benjamin Franklin said that. Everyone has heard that quote. There's nothing really new here. This was the best portrait I could find of Benjamin Franklin on these $100 bills here. So I wanted to try to really kind of pull it together. So if planning makes so much sense, why does nobody do it? And I had alluded to this earlier, but people get busy. And they have to choose their battles. Americans we're the busiest now that we've ever been in history. The American productivity indexes show us we're almost more productive than the Japanese at this point. The Americans are working really, really hard, and so we are stretched. So what I want to do is tie together the importance of planning and how a little bit of planning now can save you a ton of time and resources later. And I believe that this is sort of spoken to in Habits of Highly Effective People. I believe Covey calls it Quadrant 2. If you've read that book, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't read that book, you might want to look at it. So what happens is you start to be more proactive. Planning is a proactive thing. And the more proactive you get, the more efficient and not lucky, but the less problems you're going to run into. And you'll start to feel more lucky, because you will have already eliminated or pre-paved against those issues. So I want to give you a practical example of that. So I don't know how this will look through the YouTube, but this is effectively just shows the orbits of some planets. And you can see that there's something here. It's not a planet, the 2014 YB35. This is basically an asteroid that's in orbit. A similar orbit to the planets, but basically you can see that on occasion it may collide with Earth at some point, right? So what we're saying here is changing your trajectory with a little effort over time can mean everything. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if an asteroid's coming, we could do it like Armageddon, right? We could send people up to the asteroid and put atomic weapons in it and blow it up. And that made a great movie, but in reality, if anyone watches Science Channel or anything like that, you know that that's actually the worst thing to do, because instead of one asteroid floating around your orbit, you're going to have hundreds of asteroids, and it actually makes things worse. So it's not that you need a bigger explosion, it's that you just need a little more finesse. And so NASA came up with this idea that if you send up these inexpensive very straightforward probes out into space, you can begin to influence this asteroid. So again, you're planning, you're doing it in advance, and you're sending these probes out to meet this asteroid way before it ever gets to Earth. And it just kind of hit it a little bit, and maybe it only moves an inch a week or something. But over time, it begins to push this asteroid out of the orbit away from Earth. And that's what planning does. And imagine, in the case of saving Earth, it's everything. It's all we got. So for us to, be planning ahead and for this type of thing is great. And if you guys are interested in space like I am, there's a little video in this presentation about the Planetary Society and how they feel this is the best solution or whatever. But my point about it is trajectory. If you change the trajectory of your business today, then a year from now, you're going to be in a tremendously different place. And it means doing a little bit at a time. It does not necessarily mean trying to do it all at once or trying to get it all right on day one, because nobody gets it right or perfect on day one. All right, so if you're going to do planning, you have to have tools. And this picture here is kind of I don't think this is an actual place because I don't think there's Roman structures in the same place as pyramids, but what we have here is effectively just to think about ancient times, right? Ancient man. I watch a lot of History Channel and Science Channel. So when I watch what we've done and what ancient man was capable of doing in antiquity, then I think about the planners and the people, the project managers, and what tools do they have available to them. And this was a time where you had to use your mind. You couldn't pull up a computer and AutoCAD or whatever. You had to use your mind. You had primitive tools. You had primitive people, but look at the wonders that they created. So what tools do we have available to us today, at least as far as building e-commerce websites? If you've probably seen one of these before, this is a wireframe. And a lot of times I get requirements from customers. There are a bunch of bullet points and a wireframe of a couple of pages, and they want an estimate. And so we try to work with that. And that's good. It means that you put some thought into the layout. What it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't really create clarity about each of the individual elements. And if you're trying to make money, and if you're making money, you know that the details matter. And if not all of these things are clear, like this thing here, that could be a newsletter sign up, or it could be anything. In this case, I guess it's like a little stock quote thing. And, this could be a billboard, or it could be an ad, or it could be a video player. So wireframes are good, but they're not everything. It's like one book out of an encyclopedia. It doesn't give you all of the knowledge. It only really gives you some of the knowledge. So we don't do just wireframes. We like design documentation. And I'm going to give you a tip on how you can figure out how much documentation is enough, because I've had people send me a one-page document for a $100,000 website, and I've had people send me 20-page documents for a $10,000 website. So nobody has a doctorate on that particular detail, but we've been doing this for 10 years, and so we feel like we have a good handle on where we should go with it. So design documentation. So you're going to create a document with what your website's going to look like and how it's going to behave. And you really need detailed descriptions and custom features. You need your final artwork. Don't get involved with a project where you don't know what your website's going to look like, or, oh, we'll deal with that later. That never works out. It doesn't work out for anyone. And, maybe in certain cases, like I said, every situation is different, but at least in our experience, it always goes badly when those things are not thought out up front. A rule of thumb, basically for every $1,000 that you're spending, you want at least one page of documentation. And we recommend that so that if you're spending $4,000 to $5,000 on a website, that at a bare minimum, you have 4 to 5 pages of documentation. Not just wireframes and bullet points, again, like with actual pictures, mock-ups, and with some descriptions. Now, if you're working with an out-of-the-box solution, a lot of the functionality will be implied. The newsletter that will be there will be the newsletter that solution comes with, and so on. However, if you're making money and you're like any of the people that I've worked with, you probably have very specific implementation ideas. You want it exactly the way you want it, and that's not always possible with certain platforms. So you want to make sure that all your preferences are really documented. So like if you look at this picture here, you can see that we're even spelling out some things that maybe are a little too obvious, but you never know what people's expectations are. So we tried to spell this out. This is not something the client gave me. This is not something that I necessarily gave to the client. This is something that I built with the client together in a series of conference calls that lasted, we probably had, 10 hours of conference calls, if not more. And we built this document together. We did the graphics together. And so it was really a collaboration. Our first success together, long before we ever wrote a line of code, was that we finished this document. And when you get your documentation for your website, you definitely want to have full mock-ups. You really want to know exactly what everything's going to look like, how it's going to feel. Is everything super clear to your users, to your customers, how to check out? So include that final artwork. Now, if you're doing a smaller project, sometimes you don't need 90 pages of documentation if you're just having someone build a template for you and you're basically taking ownership of the rest of it. So in those particular cases, you may only need 4 or 5 pages of documentation. It's just that you want to make sure that it's there. Not only does it eliminate risk and it save you money, those are both good things that everybody wants. But what it also does is eliminates the headache. So because even with this client, we had some disagreements about what was in scope and what was out of scope. And we always had our documentation to refer to as the gospel of what we're doing. So when you go through the mock-ups, you want to make sure everything's clear and that everybody can, that they can do a checkout even on a mobile device and that everything looks super clear. Now, some other things that may be less obvious that you should be planning for in your website, one is content. And things are changing on content all the time with the search engines, Google being the biggest, so I'll refer to search engine as Google just to make it easy. But there are other search engines, obviously, and they all are looking at the content and coming up with conclusions. So I included some tweets here. If you guys are not on Twitter, I strongly recommend you get on and start to follow these things because they're changing all the time, and Google is trying to figure out how to kind of police the nature of what's happening online. And so the quality of your content, like I don't know if anyone has ever seen howitworks.com. There was a recent Google update a year and a half ago or so that really hurt them because they have a lot of really great content, but it's not written that well. It's kind of written more on a volunteer basis. People submit articles and stuff there. So not all the content is written well. And as a result, they kind of got devalued and lost some ranking. And you'll notice, if you think about it, you'll notice some sites you used to frequent more often have kind of dropped off the radar. And a lot of it has to do with this sort of content quality. There's also, you have capability or sort of expectation to maybe show different content to different types of devices. So you may not show as much content to a mobile phone user as you would to a full desktop user. Integrations. Some integrations are super easy, so I don't want to confuse an integration that you would do like with an accounting system with an integration that you would do, let's say, with like MailChimp or something along those lines. You really want the integrations that I'm talking about, the ones that are super dangerous to the project, are integrations to accounting systems, custom integrations. And the reason why they're dangerous is that people don't understand that there are a lot of gotchas that can occur during integration. And so often everything's ready to go, but the integration to the ERP doesn't work. Or there can be, the integration sometimes is super key. So I'll give you an example. We work with a Microsoft partner, and they had a client that had an integration. They were basically a jewelry company. They had an internal portal application, and they had hired, some people to do it inexpensively. And that part worked out, but the integration was not working, and thus it was not usable. They brought us in. They told us that it's 95% completed. They just need the last 5% done. And as we started to dig in, what we found was a complete disaster. And we were able to clean it up and basically kind of get it on its way. But it was a big mess. And the integration, you could just see when they were writing the code how much struggle there was. And when we do those integrations, we usually we're not doing them for the first time, so it's not, we kind of know what to look for. But I could sort of see that person had struggled to kind of figure it out, and so we finished it up and got them on their way. But integrations are super risky, and that delay cost that company 9 months of having a portal for their internal users to place customers. So there's real value, there was real cost and hit there. Integrations are always harder than people expect, and it's unfortunate. There are a lot of like turnkey third-party applications that make integrations sort of magic, if you will, but they're very expensive. So sometimes they cost thousands of dollars a month. I'm also going to touch on security. I think that for this audience, most folks are using a SaaS-based application, and those platforms are PCI compliant, and a lot of assurances have already kind of been made as it pertains to security. But if you are doing a custom e-commerce platform at some point, or you do something on premises, then it's worth mentioning that you don't want to take any shortcuts as it pertains to cardholder data. Right now, even government agencies like the CIA, even our own armed forces are getting hacked. This is so frequent now. Banks, major corporations, I'm sure everyone's heard about what happened to Sony. This stuff is happening, and in fact, it happens so frequently that you can actually buy insurance for it. Just like you would buy insurance for the regular part of your company, you can now buy cyber insurance so that if you leak credit card numbers or whatever, that you won't be held liable for too much of that. So if you're in a SaaS platform and you basically have everything covered for you. Let me jump down. So there were some tweets, of course. Most recently the Army got hacked. So there's some people out there talking about that. Let me jump down to scheduling. Scheduling a project is one of the most difficult things to do if your goal is to do it reliably and accurately. How many people have been through a website where like, okay, we're going live next week, and then 2 weeks later, we're going live in 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. And that drags on for a long time. I'd mentioned earlier that we were a primary web producer in a city project that had multiple vendors, and so coordinating multiple vendors with the city, as you might imagine, was a nightmare. And so as we dealt with that process, project managers would all get together and they would say, okay, we're now picking this, our go live will be, they pick these sort of grandiose times. It's always January 1st. If you've ever built websites or done project-based work, January 1st is always like, we got to get it done by January 1st, because there's sort of this feeling that if you can get it done by then, somehow you can create the momentum that you need. So scheduling is complicated for those reasons. Everything always takes longer than it's supposed to. Even that Freedom Tower I showed you it was supposed to be ready in time for the 10-year anniversary. I don't think it was ready for several years after that. It may not even still be 100% completed at this point. So everything takes longer than it. And it's not that anybody's trying to fool anyone. It's just sometimes things come up and you have to deal with them. And if you're going to be successful, you have to deal with things that come up. So a lot of times people I've seen, they'll schedule like magazine ads around a launch and things like that. You really don't want to start spending money until you have a good firm understanding that that site is pretty dang close to going live. So I always tell people, you need to, don't just trust it blindly, get in there and take a look at it, make sure that things are going well. And planning, by the way, can eliminate a lot of the scheduling risks. And if it's important that it be done on time, then it's ideal that you do the planning with whoever your implementer is. If you've ever seen one of these, this is like a Microsoft project. Let's jump into quality assurance. So a lot of times what can happen too is that when you get to the end of a project, there's not always a lot of time to kick the tires and make sure that the website is working properly, especially with websites that have large catalogs. Somebody's got to spot check the catalog and make sure that the products are loading correctly, that things look good. You have to have a content person to help you, sort all that out. Here we use a product from Microsoft called TFS, or Team Foundation Server, to help us kind of deal with the internal workings of testing and cataloging issues, and also providing a portal to clients so that they have a way besides email to express any problem they're having with us. But as it comes to quality assurance, when you get the body of work delivered to you for your e-commerce website, you ought to plan on spending 1 to 2 hours for every $1,000 that you spent on the job. So if you're spending $5,000, I would say you should go ahead and plan 10 hours to really dig deep and review that site. Now, if you only have one product that you sell, obviously, like I mentioned about the Mrs. Winchester, you do what makes sense for you, but most people have, 300 or 400 products and maybe a dozen or so categories or even more. And you're going to want to look through that stuff and make sure that everything is working properly. It's more complicated today. Now you need to make sure your website looks good on on a cell phone, like an iPhone. You also have to make sure it looks good on Android. It's not like the old days, like where you could just throw it up and it's ready to go. You need to check things and make sure that everything looks nice, because you're not just catering to one particular audience member anymore. You're actually catering to multiple audience members, and if your website isn't working in those, if you can't check out on through iPhone or whatever, that's costing you money. All right, so let me do this right now. I'm going to talk about marketing real quick, and I'm going to hand it over to Colin, who helps us with the marketing, and he has 9 years of social media experience. And social media does play a big role in today's marketing, especially as it pertains to e-commerce websites. Let me get Colin queued up for you. Please hold for Colin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Colin Pelton. I am the Social Media Director for Project Thunder, and all of their sort of online interactions with their clients, with potential campaigns that we can run, any events that we have going. In fact, this webinar was my idea to reach out and form new relationships with people that could potentially use our help. For the planning aspect of social media, most of it comes down to the branding. As you see here, we have Project Thunder as our main point of focus. A couple of things that I'd like to draw your attention to is the avatar. That's where the hand is holding the lightning in a bottle, as it were. That's our official symbol for Project Thunder, and it's also what's called our avatar. Our profile pictures and avatars are usually inexchangeable. That is your branding for everything. That little symbol, that little picture is going to come up every time you reach out to your audience. Every time you make a tweet, every time you interact with someone, they're going to be used to that symbol. From a planning aspect, that means you need to think about what kind of image you want to be broadcasting to your audience. Has your current profile picture, your current branding served you in your websites that have been up, or does it need an update? We ourselves made a major update to the Project Thunder site. It used to be less of a beaker, more of an actual bottle, but since we're all kind of science freaks, we figured we'd move off in this direction. One of the things that I want to stress from a planning aspect, when you're looking at Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest and a lot of these other platforms for reaching your audience, keep in mind that the only thing that a lot of them see is that avatar picture. When you're scrolling through a feed of thousands and thousands of friends and family and brands, you want to make sure that they can identify your brand. If it doesn't have the name in the symbol like ours, is it something that you can identify? Sort of capturing that idea and bringing it out into reality is what we were going for. Now, the other aspect of developing a good social media branding is your cover photo. These are, if you're looking at our video broadcast here, this is where Project Thunder and over the Alps are some wintry escape, or the actual cloud and thunder. That has been a morphing image, and it helps sort of tell the brand story. It can continue what you're trying to express with your avatar photos or your profile pictures, but a little bit more current. Your avatar picture will want to stay the same for as long as possible. We had our other branding for about 8 years. This is a new switch for us. Now, in using other examples, we have Anvil Brand. Anvil Brand is one of our other clients. They serve the equine market, mainly in hoof care, blacksmith, farriers, and that sort of thing. Their considered one of the more forerunning brands in their market, because even though they have other competition out there, the competition isn't utilizing social media the same way Anvil brand is. As you can see here, there's a post from American Pharaoh. This was done obviously before he won the Triple Crown, but the owner of this particular site did a free freight, free shipping type of promotion, so that it both encouraged people to discuss the race, which is great from a social media standpoint, sort of like hanging out in the bar, discussing the drinks that you're having. But he also created a promotion out of it, which encouraged some sales. If you notice, this is us working with another Anvil brand event. This one was a winter clinic. We helped a little bit with constructing the posts, working with particular hashtags and so forth. But here you have your branding as your initial post, an image to drive those numbers. We had a large amount of impressions on this particular post, and we had a very, very successful winter clinic. We also were posting on social media as well, so that people could connect that way via Twitter and so forth. So I'm going to hand it back to Calvin to discuss the special offer. You might have noticed some of Project Thunder's interactions happen over social media. We're just trying to connect with our potential future clients. If you want to follow us back or interact with us online, it'll probably be me or Calvin that you'll be talking to. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. If you're following us, you can DM us or mention us. We try and stay active as we can on all of our platforms, and Twitter is a new experiment for Project Thunder. So we are down to participate as the scientists we are. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll give you back to Calvin.
All right, everybody. I just wanted to thank Colin for talking a little bit about how to plan your social media and the planning stage. Obviously, you can have the best website in the world with the most technologically advanced features, and it won't mean anything if nobody knows how to get there. And so I think social media is just an amazing new way to reach new customers, and it not just to replace older venues or channels, but to actually complement them and reinforce them. Also wanted to ask everyone, if you do have any questions, we do have, if you're on YouTube, there's a little link there that you can click on to sort of jump into the Google Plus experience, which will give you the capability to ask questions. So while I explain the offer, feel free to shoot any question over. Project Thunder has worked on websites from $2,500 to $150,000. And so we do have a large breadth of experience. No question is not worth asking, so feel free to put those through. And I'll talk about our special offer this month. So I wanted to say thank you for bearing with us on that technical glitch on the beginning, and also tell you that we have a special offer for a video package. And Alex and I recognized a long time ago that video was becoming part of Web 3.0. People engage with video. Video is a really good venue for a lot of people to consume information. While certain people do like to read, many of us are more visual, and we actually like video. And so we started working on video production and also the Adobe format, if you will, for producing web content on video. And so we've been working on putting this offer together, basically to if anyone becomes a customer this month, that we will throw in a video to help promote your website. And just to give you a little bit of context on that, so we know that that video gets far more engagement than without it, and it's certainly something that you can use to, especially if your product is not super self-explanatory. Many of you have super cool products that are sort of new or even disruptive in nature, and having a video can really help spell that out for people. We do have several packages available. I won't get into cost right now. They range from $4,000 and they go all the way up depending on what you're looking for on the website. On the social media side, we have packages that are very affordable, and you can get started on those right away. But in this presentation, I do have a few sample videos so you guys can get an idea of like what we're talking about. Well, what kind of video do you get? These videos are, I was actually live right there. You can take a look at these videos and get an idea if you think that one of these would be super useful for your business. So what I'd like to do for right now, while we get ready to close out here, is ask everyone if you are hanging around and you would like to potentially talk with me. This is my email address. It's calvin@projectthunder.com. I only have room for 4 new clients this month at projects at this level. And so what I'd like to do is ask if you're interested to send us an email at calvin@projectthunder.com with your top 3 business goals. Out of one of those emails, I will select a winner, and you will know that you won because you will see that I have placed a purchase on your website, if it was possible for me to do so, on my new American Express card here. So, and I will Twitter about it and Facebook about it as well. All right, let me just look through some of these questions real quick. Okay, we got a question here on Twitter about how long does planning take? So with Project Thunder, depending on the scope of the project, it can be a bit different, but a lot of times for smaller websites, if we're just doing a template or a theme customization, or taking a template and making it responsive so it works on mobile, a lot of times the planning will take 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it can be done faster. So if you come to us and you say, well, listen, we've already done all the creative, all the artwork is done, and we just need you to implement it into our website, then it may be lower. So everything can be custom tailored, but those are just sort of the guess. If you had a really large website, it was going to take months and months and months, maybe we would do 8 weeks of planning, but it always depends on the client and the scope of the project. Okay, the question here is, where does mobile fit in as it pertains to planning? So with mobile, there's a few ways you can go. It's obviously less expensive to just do mock-ups for a desktop view of your website and then just kind of let whatever technology you're using to do the responsive design kind of just fold the page in the way that it would naturally and just make modest adjustments so that it looks nice. That's one way of doing it. Now, you are putting a little bit of a leap of faith that the web developer is going to do it the way that you like it. And so some people don't like that. They really want, and we've worked with a lot of perfectionists, and so we know they want it the way they want it, and that's all there is to it. So it depends on your personality and how important it is to you to control the mobile shopping experience. For our perspective, we just want to make it easy for them to check out. The motorcycle house site here that we showed earlier, we actually did do mock-ups for the tablet, desktop, and mobile view. And that was obviously a little bit larger planning package because we did mock-ups. We gave them sort of the ability to control how that would behave on the tablet and mobile phone view as well. Okay, I have one more question here about how long from beginning to end doing the planning. I say, yeah, doing the planning and then getting all the way to the launch. So what we generally tell people is that depending on the scope of the project, if we were doing a complete solution end to end, we usually like to get 4 to 6 weeks for the planning, meaning that's when we get to meet with you, we get to know you, you get to know us, and we get to understand your preference. We actually express back to you what you want, as opposed to you just telling us and us guessing. So it does take a little bit of time. You're busy, we're busy, so we integrate the best we can. And once we get all the information together, it usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks. And then from there, once we know exactly what you need, we go off and we build it. And the building usually takes 4 to 6 weeks. And then we give clients, of course, a couple of weeks or maybe longer to kick the tires, do the review, provide feedback, and then anything that needs to be adjusted or fixed. Okay, that pretty much wraps up the questions, it looks like. So there was a question about how often we'll be doing the webinar, and we are planning on doing one once a week. And so you can look back next week for an additional webinar, and we'll share that topic with you folks as soon as we can. This is going to wrap up the webinar, and I'll just leave you with one comment here. No, we didn't meet in reality, but I will say that when you meet anyone, remember it's a holy encounter, and that's from a book called A Course in Miracles. So I'll leave you on a happy trails here, and we hope that the rest of your day goes very well. And that will conclude the webinar. Thank you so much.